Arman was a young man full of dreams, but his dreams had no anchor. Every morning, he woke up with a new vision for his life. On Monday, he wanted to become a famous writer, pouring his thoughts into a novel that would inspire millions. By Wednesday, he abandoned that idea, convinced that sports were his true calling. By Friday, he was certain he would become a businessman, imagining himself running a company that would change the world. But every idea he embraced quickly faded, replaced by another, leaving him with nothing but fragments of unfinished attempts. His desk told the story of his scattered mind, half-filled journals with titles that went nowhere, books with bookmarks stuck in the first chapters, notebooks with bold outlines that never grew into real projects. His phone was filled with reminders and notes, each representing a dream that had long since slipped away. He often told himself, "I'll start fresh tomorrow." But tomorrow came, and with it came another new direction. One evening, after another day of unfinished tasks, Arman sat in silence. His thoughts swirled restlessly, leaving him tired and empty. That night, he visited his mentor, an older man who had once guided him during his school days. They sat under the stars, and the mentor asked him a simple question: "What do you truly want?" The question pierced through Arman like an arrow. He opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. For all his countless dreams and scattered ambitions, he realized he had never asked himself that question honestly. What did he truly want? He had chased ideas, not goals. He had lived in a storm of possibilities, but never chosen a direction to sail toward. The silence that followed was heavy. His mentor placed a hand on his shoulder and said gently, "A man without a goal is like a traveler without a map. He may walk endlessly, but he will never arrive." That night, Arman went home and sat at his desk. For the first time in years, he did not open a new book or scroll through his phone. Instead, he pulled out a clean sheet of paper and wrote at the top in bold letters, "What do I truly want?" Hours passed. He wrestled with his thoughts, peeling away the layers of distractions and fleeting desires. By the time the first light of dawn broke through his window, he had written down his first clear goal: "I want to master self-discipline and build a life of purpose." It was not flashy, nor was it something he could achieve overnight. But for the first time, Arman felt a strange sense of calm. His mind, once restless like a storm, had caught its first glimpse of direction. And though he didn't yet know it, that single moment of clarity would change his life forever. The next morning, Arman woke earlier than usual. The memory of the words he had written the night before still lingered in his mind like a spark refusing to die out. "I want to master self-discipline and build a life of purpose." He stared at the sentence, reading it over and over, as if trying to convince himself that it was not just ink on paper but the beginning of a new life. For the first time, he felt that he had something to work toward. He began with the smallest step he could think of: 15 minutes of silence and focus at dawn. He sat at his desk, straightened his posture, and closed his eyes. But the moment he tried to still his thoughts, they scattered in all directions. His phone buzzed, reminding him of unanswered messages. His mind wandered to the tasks of the day: what he would eat, what his friends might be doing, even random memories from years ago. He clenched his fists in frustration. Why is it so hard to simply sit still and focus? The first attempt was a failure. He lasted less than 5 minutes before giving up. Yet, a strange determination began to grow in him. That night, before sleeping, he promised himself, "Tomorrow, I will try again." The days that followed were not perfect. Some mornings he lasted 10 minutes, some only 3. At times, he grew restless, tapping his fingers on the desk, impatiently waiting for the clock to release him. Other days, he forgot and overslept. But he kept returning. The act of returning, even after failing, became his first lesson in discipline. Arman then decided to add another practice. He picked up one of the unfinished books gathering dust on his shelf and made a rule: he would read 10 pages every single day, no matter what. The first week was easy. He enjoyed the novelty of the new habit. But by the second week, when life grew busy and distractions called, it became a test of his will. There were nights when he sat in bed, his eyes heavy with sleep, forcing himself to read those last few pages. And every time he finished, he felt a small but meaningful victory. Soon, he added more small habits: a short workout each morning, a paragraph of writing every evening, and a daily review of his progress in his journal. The tasks were not grand or heroic, but each one stacked upon the other like bricks in a wall. Slowly, he began to see change, not in the world around him, but within himself. He realized that discipline was not about giant leaps of effort but about the courage to take small, steady steps each day, even when no one was watching. It was not about perfection but persistence. For every time he stumbled or broke his routine, he refused to quit. He picked himself up and returned, over and over again. There were moments of doubt when the old voices in his mind whispered, "What's the point? You've failed so many times before. You'll quit again." But this time was different. He now had a goal, a direction. And that goal became his anchor. Each day, Arman's mind grew a little sharper, his will a little stronger. He was no longer the restless wanderer of yesterday. He was a man learning, slowly but surely, to command himself. The battles were small, but he knew that each victory prepared him for the larger wars ahead. And so, his journey into self-discipline truly began, not with a grand achievement, but with the simple, stubborn act of showing up every single day. As Arman grew stronger in his routines, life seemed determined to test the strength of his new discipline. The world around him did not change simply because he had chosen a new path. Distractions still surrounded him, louder now than ever, as if they were trying to pull him back into his old life. His friends noticed the change. They called him less often at first, but when they did, their invitations were hard to resist. "Come out tonight," they would say. "Don't be so serious all the time. Life is short, you have to enjoy it." They didn't mean any harm, but their words tugged at his willpower. On some nights, he felt torn between the comfort of laughter and late-night fun with friends, and the quiet, disciplined life he was trying to build. The temptation was not only in people. It lived in his phone, in the endless stream of videos and notifications that promised quick entertainment. It lived in his old habits, the urge to sleep in, the desire to leave a task halfway done, the constant pull to chase something new instead of finishing what he had started. Each day became a battle between two voices, one urging him toward discipline, the other luring him back to distraction. One evening, after a long day, Arman found himself lying on his bed, scrolling through his phone. Hours slipped away unnoticed. When he finally looked at the time, guilt struck him. He had missed his reading, his writing, and even his journal reflection. The disappointment felt heavier than any failure he had experienced before. He sat in the silence of his room, the blue glow of his phone screen still fresh in his eyes, and whispered, "Why am I doing this? Why does this path feel so hard?" Doubt crept in, whispering that maybe his friends were right, maybe discipline was nothing more than self-imposed suffering. Maybe life was meant to be easy, carefree, and filled with pleasure. For a brief moment, he almost gave in, almost chose the easier road. But then, a memory surfaced, the words of his mentor, "The mind that cannot command itself will forever obey others." The sentence struck him like a bell. He realized that if he gave up, he would return to being a slave of his impulses, a man blown in every direction by the winds of distraction. That thought was unbearable. The next morning, Arman created rules for himself. He set boundaries on his phone usage, turning it off during his focus hours. He created a daily schedule with specific times for reading, writing, and reflection. He even placed reminders on his walls, short phrases that guided him when his willpower weakened. "Finish what you start. One small victory today." Clarity over chaos. It wasn't easy. The temptations never fully disappeared. His friends still called, distractions still buzzed, comfort still tried to seduce him. But every time he resisted, his discipline grew stronger. And every time he stumbled, he returned with greater determination. He began to understand something deeper. Discipline was not about denying pleasure forever. It was about choosing the right pleasures, the satisfaction of progress over the emptiness of distraction, the pride of self-control over the regret of wasted time. The temptations of the world were not his enemy, they were his training ground. With each battle fought, Arman felt his clarity sharpen. He was no longer chasing everything at once. He was chasing only his goal. For the first time in his life, he felt himself moving with direction, not drifting. The world still tried to sway him, but now he walked with an anchor inside him, a goal that guided his every step. And though the battles were far from over, he knew something powerful. The man who learns to resist the world's temptations becomes the man who shapes his own destiny. Years passed, and the man Arman once was began to fade into memory. The restless wanderer who had once chased fleeting desires was gone, replaced by someone steady, deliberate, and unwavering. His eyes, once scattered and unsure, now carried a calm fire. His daily habits, once a struggle, had transformed into rhythms as natural as breathing. Discipline no longer felt like a burden, it had become part of who he was. Every morning, Arman woke before the sun. His room, once cluttered with abandoned projects, was now organized and purposeful. A stack of finished books sat neatly on his shelf, journals filled with reflections and lessons lined his desk, and his goals, clear, defined, and written with precision, hung on the wall where he could see them each day. The changes in his life were not sudden explosions of success but gradual layers of growth, built brick by brick. His work flourished because he had learned consistency. Where others stopped after the initial excitement faded, Arman pressed on. His colleagues noticed his reliability. They saw that he was not the fastest or the flashiest, but he was the one who always finished what he started. Over time, this persistence elevated him above those who once seemed more talented. But the transformation was not just external. Inside, Arman felt a freedom he had never known before. In the past, he had been a prisoner of distraction, pulled in every direction by impulses. Now, his mind was steady, his heart guided by purpose. He realized that true freedom was not the absence of discipline but the result of it. Discipline gave him control over his own life, allowing him to choose what truly mattered instead of being enslaved to what felt good in the moment. There were still temptations, still moments when the world tried to pull him off course, but the difference was clear. Arman no longer swayed easily. His clarity acted like a compass, always pointing him back toward his goals. He didn't waste energy on what didn't serve his vision. Where once he had chased a dozen dreams and caught none, now he pursued one clear purpose with unwavering focus. People around him began to notice the transformation. Friends who once laughed at his seriousness now came to him for advice. Younger men and women asked him how he stayed so consistent, how he resisted distractions, how he built such a life of calm progress. Arman would smile softly, remembering his own struggles, and say, "I wasn't born disciplined. I trained my mind to obey. It began with small steps, and it grew stronger with every choice I made." The more he shared his journey, the more he realized that discipline was not just about personal success. It was about becoming an example, a light for others who were lost in the same storm he once lived in. His story carried a simple but powerful truth: clarity creates power, and discipline sustains it. Arman had finally discovered the beauty hidden in struggle. Every battle he fought, every temptation he resisted, every small choice he made, it all shaped him into the man he had become. He was no longer at war with himself. His thoughts, actions, and purpose were aligned. And in that alignment, he found strength, peace, and a life that no distraction could steal away. Time moved gently forward, and Arman, once the restless wanderer and later the disciplined achiever, stepped into a new season of life. His hair carried threads of silver now, but his eyes shone brighter than ever. The fire of discipline had not burned out, it had matured into a steady glow, the kind that warmed others who came near. He no longer chased personal milestones with the same intensity. Instead, his focus shifted outward. Young people came to him with questions, much like he had once gone to his mentor under the stars. They asked him how to find focus, how to resist temptations, how to carry on when their own strength felt too small. Arman listened patiently to each of them, for he saw in their struggles the reflection of his own past. When they expected him to give quick answers or shortcuts, he never did. Instead, he told them stories, of the mornings when his mind refused to obey, of the nights he nearly gave up, of the countless times he stumbled but rose again. He wanted them to know that discipline was not a gift some were born with but a skill anyone could build if they committed to a clear goal. He compared the mind to a wild horse, untamed, powerful, and restless. If you let it run free without direction, it will circle endlessly, wasting its strength, he would say. But if you train it, if you give it a rider who knows the destination, that same wildness will carry you across mountains. Arman's teachings began to spread. Some who listened to him went on to build businesses, others became writers, leaders, or mentors themselves. But Arman always reminded them of the true victory: not the wealth, not the recognition, not even the success. The real victory was mastery of the self, the quiet strength of knowing your mind obeyed your will, the peace that came from living with purpose instead of chaos. In his quiet moments, Arman often thought back to that night long ago when his mentor had asked him, "What do you truly want?" He realized now that answering that question with honesty had been the turning point of his life. Without a clear goal, his discipline would have meant nothing. But with clarity, every choice, every battle, every sacrifice became meaningful. As the years unfolded, Arman's story became less about one man's discipline and more about a legacy. His journals, filled with lessons and reflections, were passed down. His words were remembered by those who had heard them. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. A clear goal turns chaos into order. Master your mind, and you master your life. Even after Arman was no longer there in body, his story lived on. His students became teachers, his listeners became leaders, and his message continued to echo across time. The restless wanderer who once chased 100 unfinished dreams had become a guiding light for countless others. And so, his journey closed not with an ending, but with a continuation, his life a reminder that greatness is not reserved for the lucky or the gifted, but for those who learn the art of discipline and walk with the power of a clear goal.